Hi everyone, I'm Scott Davenport and welcome to ON1 Inspiration. My sincere thanks to ON1 for having me back to share another photo with you. If you're not familiar with my work, I'm a landscape photographer and photo educator based in San Diego, California. And a prevalent theme in my photography is water. Certainly the ocean, living in San Diego, but whether I'm walking along the beach or I'm walking through a city center, I'm always on the lookout for water. Fountains, reflecting pools, a lake, a river, a stream. Those are the things that make me want to take out my camera and create some photos. And I went to the Oregon coast recently for a week of beachcombing. And I know it sounds hokey, but I felt like a kid again. As a kid, I grew up on the beach and I'd go out with my little plastic pail and walk along the beach finding treasures and bringing them home. And nowadays I do the same thing, although I'm just capturing the treasures with a camera. And so I have this scene that I came upon at Whales Head Beach in Oregon that I want to share with you today. So let's get into Photo Raw and make ourselves a nice seascape photo. So here's the photo we're going to work with today. And I took this because I liked this branch that was reaching out and it had a nice shape, the way that the shadow was mimicking this form here. Got the camera down a little low so I can make sure to have this kind of this symmetry between the fork in the branch and then on the shadow. And just let the background be background. You can see I shot this at f/16, but this is soft and this is a little dreamy, and that's okay. Really, this is going to be my emphasis and my subject. I'm going to bring this into develop and start straight away with a little bit of barrel correction. There's a slight amount that I want to take care of with the transform tool. This is going to be subtle, but just a touch, and so I'm just kind of rocking my finger back and forth. I think I want to go maybe -2, so we can just see before and after with that, just to take the edge off some of the lens distortion that's there. Now let's get back into the main stuff here in tone, and let me close down the info tab so we can see all these different sliders. I'm going to start with the temperature just to get that dialed in a little bit. I'm going to warm it up. Around there looks pretty good. Again, I'm ending up, it looks like I'm ending up somewhere around 7. The number's not important. It's the look that I'm after. I want to make sure that this area of the clouds, that's more or less the whites in the sky, and the beach should be a little more yellow. Now, I want to do the black and white point and so forth. So I'm going to turn on the clipping mode here. Turn on clipping with show clipping. So as I adjust these sliders, I can see where I am blowing out highlights or I have shadows that aren't exposed. I'm going to start by upping the exposure a little bit. This just feels a little bit underexposed. So maybe 1/4 plus. That's good. I can see more of these details here in the branch. Now for white and black point, as I raise whites up, you can see there's that clipping in the sky. So the show clipping is doing its job. And so I'm just going to back that off until I don't have any clipping. Right there, looks good. We'll do the same thing with black point, bring that down. And as I start to see clipping right down here in the very bottom of the branch, that's the darkest area. So we'll nudge that maybe off 1 point. And I'm okay if there's a couple of specks that are pure black. That's not a problem for me. I do want to increase the shadows quite a bit. And that is to let this branch be seen, because I want these textures ultimately to bring those things out. Pretty good there. And reverse for the highlights. We'll bring that down to get a little more detail in the sky. Let's bring this really far down. That's way too crunchy and terrible looking. Something like that looks pretty good. All right, we're getting there. This is starting to come together. Now, as I was adjusting those highlights and bringing them back, I'm starting to see all the different dust spots that are on my sensor. And I know at this point in my trip, it was the end of the trip, the sensor had gotten pretty dirty with a week plus out on the beaches. So something I like to do to find dust spots is actually take the haze slider and bring it all the way down. I mean, this looks terrible for processing, but it is great to find all these different dust spots and this little weird lens booger, whatever that is. So I'm going to grab the retouch brush and just tap on a few of these. I won't bore you endlessly with cleaning what is an incredibly dirty sensor. And yes, I still need to get my camera in to have it cleaned. And maybe I'll sweep that one right over there. Well, that did not do a good job. Let's do a tap. Now I'll use the perfect eraser on that one. That one looks like it's going to be a little more work. Make the eraser a little bigger. Hit that there. And then maybe wiggle that through there a little bit. Okay, we get the idea. That's how I'm going to go through and clean up the rest of these dust spots. And I can take the haze slider back to nominal just by double clicking on it. All right, looking pretty good. We're getting there. Let's see. Anything else I want to do retouch and tone wise? Kind of my workflow is I'll get the tone and the base of things looking pretty good. And then I'll start doing any obvious retouching and then go into stylization. I think what I want to do is I want to clean up the beach some. I don't mind these stringy bits of seaweed and kelp, but these bits and pieces of rocks and the little stray scraps of logs and twigs, I want to clean some of those up really around my subject, because I want this branch to stand out and not be competing or with your eyes for things like these little pieces here. So again, with the I will use the eraser for this, because I think the eraser does a little bit of a better job when you've got something underneath like sand. And just to give you an idea of what we'll do here, I'll start just clicking through to clean up things that are getting close to my subject, this branch, this little guy under here, and so on and so forth. Get some of these guys down in the corner there. And to keep this video a reasonable length, because watching Scott click on specks of sand is about as fun as watching paint dry, I'm going to go finish this job and come right back to where we left off and continue on with the stylization. Okay, after a bit of cleanup, you can see I tidied up this area of the beach and the surrounding areas here. There's a couple of spots that are a little difficult to get into, and I may deal with that at the very end in layers with something like the clone tool, where I can use the edges of objects to tidy it all off. But this is looking much better. My subject is much more isolated. And as I'm looking at it, I think I actually want to pop the shadows up even a little bit more. And I'm going to just inch that up until I can really see the underbelly of that branch there. So ending up in a pretty healthy amount. That looks pretty cool. I like that. Now this is getting a little bit hot out here, but we can work with that later on to rein that back in. So now that I've got the tone and the general color and feel for it, I'm pretty much done with tone and color. I'm not going to touch contrast here, and I'm not going to play with saturation and vibrance. There's not a lot of color in this. It's really a pretty muted scene. But contrast-wise, I'm going to do that with effects, and I really want to focus that on the branch. So over to the effects module, add in dynamic contrast. Now, I only want the branch to be affected. So the very first thing I'm going to do is open up masking and click invert. Now that removes the effect from the image, and that's exactly what I want. That's cool. We're going to grab our brush. Where's my brush? Brush. The B key. There we go. That's my brush right there. All right. And I will turn on the perfect brush. I'm going to put the opacity, the brush at 100%, and just start to paint. Paint in, switch the mode, paint in on to the branch itself, right? And so just starting to paint through here. Now, the edge detection for the perfect brush is going to do a pretty good job, but the tones, I'm not brushing right now, I'm just pointing. The tones between the sand and this lower part of the branch, those are pretty close. So this may take a few passes here. I'm going to press the O key, which is showing me my mask overlay. And I can fill in the part that I missed there. And actually, let's switch the mask view mode to red and then press O key again. Now I can really see what's going on here. So as I move through here with the perfect brush, I'm kind of just doing a series of clicks, paying attention to keep the crosshairs centered on this log, this wood here, and not veer off into the sand, so that I can get just the branch affected by this contrast. Okay, got a little sloppy on that stroke, and we'll clean up down here a little bit. I'm okay if it's not perfect because ultimately it's more about the emotion of the scene than anything else. I'm going to pop back out here, press the X key, and that switches me into paint out mode, so I can remove that little mistake that I made there. X key again to return to paint in, and kind of finish up through here to finish off getting the contrast pop on this here. So O key to turn that off, turn it on. Pretty good. I will now turn off the perfect brush, and this is where I will switch back to the grayscale view, as I find that in certain modes are easier to see certain things. It's easier for me to see where did I miss all those little spots inside of this log that I want to get added contrast to. So we'll sweep through there, and I do need to be extra careful here because I have turned off the edge detection, the perfect brush, so I don't want to be sloppy. Looks like that's good, and right over there. And again, toward the edges, I'm okay if it's a little rough, because that's not really going to impact the final image that terribly. Okay, so there we go. We've got that painted in there, and so we can see before and after that contrast is only affecting the branch. And I think I want to change it too. I think I want to pop up more of that contrast, and let's inch the mediums up. Actually ended up being pretty far. And even let's look at the smalls, because there are some fine details in that log. Let's check a before and after on that. I'm liking that. It's it's a little grittier. It's really starting to see the contours of this. Let's also play with shadows, because now I can I updated the shadows over in the develop module before, but now since I've painted the mask just onto the branch, I can increase or open up my shadows just on the branch itself. So before and after. I like that a lot. That's looking really nice. I think I'm going to stick with that. Now, as I've been working on that, my eye keeps getting drawn back up over here into the sky. Let's go take care of that. I'm going to move over to the local adjustments. I have an adjustment here. Let's preload this with a couple of things. I'm going to reduce the exposure some, and maybe even back off the detail some, because I don't want as much detail in the background. I just want that to fade off. So I'm just going to pick, let's start with a nice round number. Let's choose 10. And let's see what that does for me. So grab a gradient, kind of drop it on the scene, rotate it around a little bit so it's just touching the upper part of the sky there. Before, after. Okay, good. That's taken the brightness edge off of that. And it's also softening those rocks back there. So when I look at this scene, I'm going to see, front and center this branch, and that's what I want the eyes to be looking at. Now, when I took this shot, I thought about it as a black and white photo. So let's go back into the overall settings. I'm still in effects. Let's add a black and white filter. Because when I was thinking about this, I thought, oh, this scene might make a nice black and white. So let's begin with auto on the color response, and that looked like it did okay, but it darkened the beach a whole lot. The beach is mostly yellow. Let's start bringing that up. Somewhere around there looks all right. What's the reds doing? We'll leave it around there. Yeah, things just got really dark. What about green? Okay, the greens are mostly going to be this hill back here. We saw that in color. That's where the greens were. And we'll darken that, because darker tones retreat and they go off into the distance, and brighter tones move forward. So darkening those greens will kind of send those hills backwards a little bit, and that will help us, or help what I want here, which is to have this branch jump out at us. Same thing for the aquas. The only aqua tones are going to be out in that ocean area. The blues, it's not really doing much. We'll just leave it about where it was. And there is really no magenta in here. And as I'm looking at this, I'm not particularly inspired. I'm not liking the black and white. I turn it off. I'm preferring the color. There's a nice warm, cool feel to it. But maybe we can use this black and white to give that a little bit of a boost. Now, if I go into the blending options, this gear menu here, and I change the mode all the way down to luminosity, and let's see what that does before and after. Here's before, and here's after. It adds a little crispness, a little punch to those colors, and really actually a touch of contrast to the scene overall. So I'm going to keep that. So that's an interesting use of the black and white filter. You make the best black and white version of the photo you can, and then flip your blending option to luminosity. You get a bit of a color pop. So speaking of color, I mentioned in the intro that this reminded me of being a kid and walking along the beaches. So let's look at a split tone for a vintage type feel, and out of the right out of the chute, I kind of like that. But there's this one here called Ocean, which jumps right out at me because hey, we're at the ocean, and I like that more. I do like that. I may back off the opacity some. Very slight though. I really like what it's doing to the scene, and it's adding that kind of memorabilia, memory feel to it. I'm gonna stick with that. And I think from here, I'm just going to finish it off with a vignette. So let me grab a vignette, and I will first just bring the brightness down a little bit, and then I'm going to bring the feather all the way down. And the reason I do that is I like to see the edge of this vignette and where it is. So I'm going to, from here, I'll adjust the size and just get it reined in a little bit. And what else? Brightness I should fine tune. Well, at this point I'll increase my feather, and then brightness I'll just fine tune to get the feel for it right. Looking pretty good there. Very last thing I'll do is I'll use the crosshairs and just slightly bias the vignette downward. So again, I'm further de-emphasizing that sky. If I take that feather all the way back down, you can see I've lowered the vignette and then it kind of veered off a little bit to the right. I actually didn't want to do that. So let's adjust it while I can see it, and then bring the feather back up. And that extra touch, it's going to, again, add the vignette, a little more darkening right out of the sky, and bring my eyes down to this branch here. And now that I've added the vignette, I'm going to go revisit the dynamic contrast filter. And I love this feature of Photo Raw, being able to just jump down and start adjusting things without having to turn off all the filters above it. I want to add a little more punch to that branch. Just really give it some oomph. Is that a word? If anyone knows how to spell oomph, send me an email. Really jump that up there. What's the largest doing? Maybe something like that, perhaps right around there. So that is our finished photo. So here is the before, right out of the camera, and then here's after. Did some tone work in Develop, added a little bit of style and focused contrast on the branch, some local adjustments to tone back some of the highlights in the sky. And I think the big winner for that was this split tone ocean preset here that just added a nice vintage feel for it. And that creates a nice memory for me of my time at Whales Head Beach. I'm Scott Davenport, and thanks very much for joining me on this episode of On1 Inspiration.